up doing.
Sorry, I almost forgot.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so you were saying larger fears based on.
The thing is like sometimes I don't even know what they're based on. Uh,
Okay.
and that's like kind of another thing that I was thinking about, that like the initial question that you posed is, I don't know if it's just fear. Like I think there's a lot of elements that go in behind it.
Hmm. Have you had any luck identifying any of those elements?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
So it's interesting that you'd say that like it's like hard to identify what some of those things are because that's like part of the struggle, right? Is like naming the fear. It's almost like you can take away some of its power if you can at least name it and like start to wrestle it into like language. Um, yeah, and I think it sort of builds on like the reading that we did last week, which I know not everybody's reading all of the readings, but I've have had this little serendipitous thing that's been happening where they're kind of building on each other. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of it is conscious choice keeps coming back up. Um, so I mean, they start this one out by saying like, what is the, or like, it's about making art, and then it creates this division between good art and genius. And so I was interested in like, do you guys ever think about that? Like, how would you define what good art is, as it pertains to like maybe how you make or how you think about the artwork that you like consume when you go to like museums? Like, how do we judge that, and why do we put some people in like the genius category?
I feel like whenever I read that, I would think that like students and like people still learning art can make good art, but then like the people who are like professionally doing it and people whose work is in museums and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
um, I feel like some of them are geniuses because they've like broken barriers
Mm-hmm.
in like the art field and they've done things that nobody else has done, and for that they're geniuses. If that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, but I would say that one could argue that there are people breaking. Some of you guys are breaking barriers, and you don't
That's
even know it. Um, and I really, I'm glad that we did this reading because it talks about something that is like so important for you guys to kind of like take in like as students, which is that like not everybody's going to continue to make. And they even pointed out that like there are people that get to that top tier level. It's like their mindset of like the main goal of what they wanted to do is up here, and the second they get there they're like, well, that's what I wanted to do, and then they stop. And so like, yeah, I thought this was interesting to see like what is the thing that makes you the person that's never going to stop. Like, I mean, and a large part of it, like I literally wrote down at one point that like uh, that that literally the thing that like makes good artists is just the Chumbawamba song. It's the idea that like you just keep getting back up, even like when you're being hit over and over and over again, you just keep doing it. Which eventually that reference will no one will know what I'm talking about when I say that. But I like to think that you guys have heard that song. Um, I'm kind of interested in what you guys thought of like this idea of like, why is it so hard to complete a piece of artwork? Like,
Because
why?
you keep getting back up, so you feel like, oh, I gotta keep like I gotta keep working on it. Like I've definitely done that where I'm looking at pieces, so I'm like, I probably could have stopped like 3 hours ago. This is kind of worse now.
Mm-hmm. Or it's like, I don't know about you guys. Like, well, yeah, because I don't really know. I mean, I know like Kate. I've met Amy before. I don't know everybody, but so I don't know how much you've gotten to show your artwork. or if it's mainly been relegated to like the Webster community academic sphere, or like those like like in-class critiques. But like when you start applying to stuff, and you like get accepted, or like you get shows, like there are times where you get these deadlines and like you have to make it, and sometimes you like hit this wall where you're just like, well, I don't know if that's done, but I'm out of time, so here it is.
Yeah, that's definitely happened to me like multiple times where like I mean it's mostly because I procrastinate on like everything. So I will like wait until the last minute and be like, "Oh, like I'll have enough time to do it." And then like of course whenever I work on it, I don't know what to do like for the project. So then I spend like the whole like day before it's due working on it. And then the deadline comes and I'm like, "Well, I guess it has to be done."
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I feel that.
I mean, like the system, you know, they talk about the like historically speaking, like the system used to be set up to where like artists didn't have to think about that kind of stuff. Like art was just inherent, and it was supported, and it was almost this religious experience because it was tied to the church. And so like, not to mention like the fact that you had all of these like rich like patron families that were like paying artists to do what they do, and almost like dictating and giving rules about what they wanted to be done, like commissioning paintings, like, or sculpture, like literally dictating like what the subject matter was going to be. Like, I think it's interesting that it points out that like the culture has shifted, and it's become harder to be an artist, and it's almost like it's creating this myth, right? Like this myth that like you are the art and the art is you, and that inherently like is sort of a post-contemporary like, or a postmodern or contemporary like viewpoint of like what it is to make art. And like that's a lot of pressure, like deadlines, a lot of pressure, especially if you're like a procrastinator. But then there's like the added deadline of like art being inextricably tied to who you are as a person. So I don't know if you guys have gotten to this point yet, but you know, they were saying that like your job is to sort of create the artwork that is supposed to be created by you. So how do you do that? Like what are you guys sort of like, and you guys are still sort of in academia, and so like you're finding that, or maybe you came into Webster and you like had this, I think we have a tendency to try to, you know, think of the institution as teaching you something, but you come to the institution with something that is inherently you, and that has value. And I think what happens a lot of the time, both in undergrad and graduate school, is that like we try to take you and bend you and put you in a certain box. But have any of you guys like throughout this experience of being in school, or even just like, I don't know, the past few months, have you guys made any discoveries of what you think is inherently genuine as it pertains to you specifically? Because that's the big question. Get out of here, Kat.
I feel like a lot of us are like at this age, we're all like in that stage of still trying to find ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like as I'm in my last year, I'm slowly starting to realize the things I like and I don't like about art, because I've like went through all the classes. Like I've been through all the classes at Webster. We do different things. Like our professors push us towards things that we like and what we don't like. And I don't know, it's just like a giant process that we all have to go through. And
Mm-hmm.
some of us will find it in the end like sooner than others. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Or sorry,
Yeah.
my dog's coming into frame, but
That's okay.
I don't know. That's just like how I feel about it.
Well, I mean, part of it is that like the sooner you sort of look at all of those things and figure out exactly what you do like and what you don't like, the better, because then you know what I guess what the reading refers to as what nourishes you. Because like that's where sustainability comes from, right? Like how do you make artwork that feeds you? I think actually, hopefully you guys got to come to the artist lecture today, but I think that's a good point where like I think Yaoshin like breaks that down really well, where he talks about all of the images that he consumes in the process of like how he makes his artwork. And it's coming from like really disparate places, right? So like, you know, Hey Arnold, but then also like historical, like racist cartoons. I think it's important to kind of like understand that everything that you consume also becomes fodder for what you make. And just because like your job is not to judge what you're into. And I think a lot of people don't, I think especially academia tries to squash that down. They try to say like, oh no, you can't be interested in anime or you can't be interested in cartoons. But I'm here to tell you that you can. You absolutely can. Don't let them beat the you out of you, because like that is what inherently will make you have a voice that's genuine, right? You know, you can't change who you are to fit somebody else's box. I have a question, and this is something that like definitely like folds into I guess me looking back on like my academic career and something that like I experienced when I was like y'all's age. Do you guys call yourself artists?
I do.
You
I
do?
like to think that I am. Now,
Oh,
I didn't before.
okay.
I've grown like so much with my art and all that, and I feel like I've learned a lot and enough to say that I think I'm an artist.
Okay. Man, you're like ahead of the game.
Yeah, I think I'm just now starting to call myself that. Like before, it would depend on like who I'm talking to. Like
Uh-huh.
people who aren't in the art field and like family, they're all like, "Oh yeah, Rachel's the artist of the family," and like
Mhm.
I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm an artist." But like with my classmates, I was just like a classmate, and like that's how I
Mhm.
thought of myself. But like now that I'm like actually selling my art and like doing my own thing, I'm in shows. I'm like, "Oh, I am an artist now." So.
I used to be really uncomfortable calling myself an artist. I think it's that like um or at least confidently saying it. It was like I would like say it. I would allow other people to refer to me as an artist. But I would just kind of like if I ever said it out loud to somebody else, I would just like or like I used sculptor as like almost this like separate moniker um because it seemed more comfortable. It was like a box that like felt comfortable to me. It wasn't until after grad school that I actually started referring to myself as an artist. So if any of you have like one of those things, but like I ended up writing it down. Uh, you know, in large measure, becoming an artist consists of learning to accept yourself, which makes your work personal, and in follow your own voice, which makes your work distinctive. And so it's that idea of like being genuine. You have to be able to accept yourself. And part of that is accepting that you are an artist and what you have to say is valid, despite sort of that fear that like, you know, I think I was, you know, refer to it as like imposter syndrome, right? I think is what it's called when you're just like, they're gonna find me out. I'm not supposed to be here. What about, you know, what about those sort of the assumptions that they presented that are supposed to like, I guess, assuade some of the doubts and the fear. Like art is made by ordinary people. Like, yeah, I mean, do any of you guys have any airs or like assumptions that like you're not a real artist if, you know, you don't make it to that like MoMA stage level of being an artist?
I think if you don't make it that far, you're still an artist. You're just like not as well known. Like you're not going to be in as many shows as
Mm-hmm.
people. But I still
Well,
think you're valid as an artist.
yeah. I I had a student that like was obsessed with this idea of like like she referred to it as an art world titan, like becoming a titan, becoming one of the giants. And I was like, dude, I was like, no matter how hard like you try, like you need to understand that like you might not reach that sort of like celestial level, because it's not up to us, right? Like there's so much about the art world that is just inherently set up for us to fail. It's like it's the culture of the art world. Like, I mean, you guys will experience this like once you start applying to shows and all those things. You're not going to get into, I don't know, 90% of the stuff that you apply to. And so that's why I'm going to bring it back to this idea of like knowing your audience or knowing who you're making artwork for. I think, you know, I think towards like the end of the reading, on page 12, like the operating manual for not quitting, I thought was like so concise and so good, which is just like make artwork and share it with people that also make art, which is sort of like boiling down art school to like just its simplest form. So again, I would encourage you guys to get to know one another on like a deeper level, and hopefully continue communicating outside of academia, because that's one of the things that makes creating sustainable. Like, do you guys find, and is that harder now? Like, is it harder to share or to make and share artwork with everybody now that like we can't even be around other people? Like, how has that become complicated, and sort of how do we navigate that in sort of the new remote and or digital sphere?
I'm always someone that has believed that there's a difference of seeing art in person versus on a screen,
Mm-hmm.
even in a photograph, in a textbook, like on a whiteboard. I think you just get a different like connection and experience from it. Um, that's just me personally. I like that connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more difficult for me because I'm someone who likes like if it's I just like to get like as close as I can to it and like spend time with it, you know, and then like if it's a show opening, I like to communicate with the people in the space and it like
Mm-hmm.
creates a whole like lovely feeling. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, online.
Well, I mean, you know, and it's different for every person, but I think it's one of those things that like, at least in St. Louis, but I think sort of across the US, like we're realizing that like, you know, we're in month 6 of this, and like we can't go without culture, or at least some of the at least pseudo normal versions of culture, like for the unforeseeable future. And so what you've seen is like museums opening back up, them allowing, you know, people to come in via like scheduled times. That way you can still have that like physical experience. Like the Great Rivers Biennial just opened up at CAM. I don't know if you guys are interested in seeing any of that, but it's pretty awesome. As well as like Yao Xin's work in the teaching gallery in the upstairs part of CAM. You can see all of those paintings, or not all of the paintings that he talked about today, but some of them, and then even more of those paintings like in person. And there is something that is so different to see those in all of their glory and detail. Oh my God, he's such a tight painter. Like, it's crazy, his paintings. And it's just something that doesn't translate like when you're doing a screen share. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't translate. So yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to figure out how to navigate, you know, how do we make that physical experience, how do we make that possible again, or at least half of what it was. Um, I don't know. I was like pushing on campus. I was like, how can we create like a guerrilla art space like outside of the art building, and we can create a way to like still see live art just when we're navigating campus. And then I was told that like we're not allowed to do that. There's so much. What do you guys feel about like the restrictions? This kind of doesn't have anything to do with like the reading, but I'm just curious. You can speak to it. It's fine. We're all sort of experiencing this together.
Um, I don't know, this is kind of like an interesting personal experience, but I'm actually like in the vaccine trial study group,
Oh,
and like even like before I went in to be eligible, they're like, okay, like if you stay at home like all day, we don't really like want you in it, which I thought was interesting because
hmm.
otherwise, like, I don't know. I guess I don't know if they were saying that like the longer people stay in, maybe the longer that it's going to be like hanging around. I know nothing, like I'm not a virologist, like I'm not a scientist. I do not want to be one of those people just like
Hmm.
claiming things with no citing, but I just thought that was interesting, like seeing, because I'm not in science at all, so like seeing like the scientific side of it from a distance was,
Well, yeah. I mean, they're trying to figure out the efficacy of the treatment, right? You know, to even like see if it's working. And
yeah,
so, like, if you're staying at home, then you're the control.
yeah,
Like, you're not like there's no variables going on. Whereas, like, if you're like, you know, like me, I go onto campus like almost every single day, just tooling
yeah,
around town. Yeah. So I think there is this kind of like, mm, at least in terms of like how the university's been handling stuff, there is this kind of like cloud of uncertainty, right? Um, like, and I think that again can be kind of like tied back into like the reading, which is that like I think some of us that uncertainty sort of like exacerbates or even maybe even in some cases like creates anxiety. Um, and like really in order to like continue functioning, right, we have to somehow become okay with uncertainty. um, do you guys have any experience with like coping mechanisms of like how to, I guess, like reframe uncertainty to where it's not a bad thing but like, you know, neutral?
Well, I actually wanted to address the last question that you had about the restrictions.
Oh, go for it.
For me, like this whole situation wasn't really bad for me, like when it came to creating art. I actually have started making more stuff because of all the time inside and because of like all the stuff going on, um, preventing me from being able to, I guess, live life the way that I did before.
Hmm.
Um, which was like I would constantly put other things before my artwork, like going out and hanging out with my friends or like going like doing things that I mean I can't do now.
Yeah.
And now like being stuck inside, like all I have to do is create.
Yeah.
And so it was actually very beneficial for me. And then going off of that, I actually started working more digitally. So having everyone stuck inside and everyone being online and on social media, it was actually really helpful for me because then I was able to like start selling stuff online and get more stuff out there. And everyone's like on Instagram like all the time now.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful.
Right, we're consuming information and we're consuming images at like such like a rapid fire speed nowadays. But I do think again it's I was talking about making artwork and sharing it with other people. Like we now have all these platforms that like we can share what we make in real time, right? You know, we can do like literal live feeds of what we're doing and share it with the world. You know, but there's also, yeah, there's that idea of like, opening up what the art world is to where it can now include you having your own control over the commodification of what you make. Meaning that like you said, you can sell what you're making directly to the consumer.
Right.
Which like is, I don't know, I'm really interested to see what happens to the gallery system as a result of that. Because yeah, there is like a lot of change happening right now, and you know, some of it's, yeah, it's anxiety producing, but some of this uncertainty is bringing out some like really cool stuff. So yeah, I do think there is something to like you know, feeling those like feelings of anxiety, giving them space, but then figuring out a way to like bounce back. Anybody that's ever taken any of my classes knows that like I preach the gospel of resiliency at all times. Trying to say like, okay, I like to, and they sort of speak to that in this reading, right? You know, they talk about the fact that like fear is sort of a constant. It's like always present, but you kind of have to figure out what to do with that fear, or how much power rather you give that fear. I think they refer to it as that like magic moment, right? Like when you start a project, there's like that one magic moment when you first start, but it immediately becomes like harder to work on because the magic, it kind of is gone. And so I was thinking about this idea of like not chasing the magic at all, but just, you know, just striving for contentment in your day-to-day life of your practice of art making. I really liked the line, all you can work on today is directly in front of you. There's something about that seemed like really poignant, not only for just a creative practice in general, but just like on a macro level. I like underlined it like 17 times. I was like, I need that statement in my life, because a lot of the time I'm juggling 8 million things and then shaming myself or feeling guilty about not getting more done somehow. So that like, I think sometimes it's, you know, it's the adage, right? Like you take it one day at a time. But for some reason, you know, when you're making, you lose sight of that. I don't know. What is authenticity? And how do we become resilient, authentic makers who make our artwork and not somebody else's?
Experience. I think our own experiences, growth, learning. I personally take like a lot of my artwork from what I've gone through. I cannot see anyone. I do not know where Zoom went. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
It's okay. I can hear you.
Okay. But yeah, that's kind of how I've come along. I definitely think like as a senior now, looking back at like what I've done in the previous years, I definitely see like a lot of growth and like originality and like creating my own scenes, my own environments that I feel like I take from my everyday life.
It's like getting comfortable in your own skin, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because like in the beginning you're taking like figure drawing and like design and drawing and you're doing all this like, you know, it's assignments and they're great for learning, you know, they're great tools. And then I feel like just practice and then over time, like you said, like getting comfortable, and then it's like changed into something I'm pretty confident in.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have that experience of like when you experience like time periods where you don't make and you start to feel weird or uncomfortable because you haven't made something? I think he melodramatically like described it as being painful. Like I don't know. There's something, I think the further you get and the more comfortable you get in like your own skin, um, the more making becomes a part of you. And it's weird. I think it does start to become like an itch that needs to be scratched, right? You know, you'll start to like, the more you do it and the more it becomes literally a practice, uh, it 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 again, like, it's, we are not our artwork, but I think our art practice can very much be a part of who we are. Um, and I think that sometimes that's why, you know, again, they said it's why it's scary. It's like a vulnerable experience to say, like, it's like, this is something that I think about. I think we have a
For
tendency.
me,
Yeah.
for me, I feel like there was such a long time before now that I didn't create stuff for myself, and it was always like the things that I made was for assignments and things. So
Mm-hmm.
now that, like, during the quarantine, I had started making all these new pieces just like for fun, just for
Mm-hmm.
me, and I had never done that like before. And so now I do get that feeling that, like, oh, it's weird that, like, I'm back to working on assignments and those kinds of projects, but I've had to put my personal stuff on hold in order to, like, keep up with
Mm-hmm.
everything. And now it, like, feels weird. But before there was like a normalcy to it,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm like a little bit ashamed of as an artist, that I felt that it was normal to not create for myself.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like, again, that's that imposter syndrome, right? Like being like, well, how did I go through periods of that feeling like it was normal, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're a true artist, right? If you're an artist, like, you should have that mythical like drive that makes you want to create every single day. But in actuality, the truth of it is that like half of the time you have to like kick your own ass into gear, and it's hard, and it's hard to do that. Like, I literally, like, I had started filming like a paper mache demo for one of my classes, and that is, I swear to God, the first thing that I've made in like, I don't know how long. Well, not true. Like, I made like stuff like for in class demos, but like in my home studio, that was the first thing that I made in my home studio since moving here in like April, or no, May. Um, you know, I haven't been stepping into and showing up for myself as an artist. And like, you know, but again, like the reading says, stopping is not quitting. Stopping is necessary sometimes, and you're the only person that can gauge that. Like, there are going to be times where maybe like literally the world at large is going to make it really difficult for you to create at least the type of work that you want to create, right? So like, I moved up to New York. I was working in fabrication. I was expelling all of my physical and creative energy and making someone else's artwork. So by the time I got home, there wasn't any left for me to make my own, at least not the type of work that I thought I should be making. Um, and so I literally went back to the drawing board. I started making drawings because it was the only thing that I had energy to do. Um, you know, but then those drawings became ideas, and those ideas became sculptures like several years later. Um, so yeah, just give yourself a break every once in a while. Like just because you stopped making the work that you feel like was for you, Kate, like doesn't mean that you're not going to return to that. Or it doesn't mean that you didn't learn something through the process of like making all of that artwork that you're now subtly and maybe subconsciously funneling into the projects that you're doing for your classes. Like at least like in terms of like themes or like imagery, or even just like, you know, discipline of doing it like on time, like not procrastinating. Like maybe you develop some weird skill over the summer that like, you know, you don't struggle as much to like actually sit down and do the assignment. Because we learn something from every single experience. Anybody else? I mean, we kind of jumped around in terms of like touching on stuff. I'm never good at like talking about stuff in order. I just end up like follow the bigger picture. Yeah, I mean that book was great. And I think there's a couple of chapters that I might actually end up sharing beyond that, because it talks about like, the fear within, but then like the fear of the outside world as well. And I think those might be some interesting things to touch on, given the current climate and global pandemics and, forest fires and hurricanes and general tornado fire that is everything right now. All right. Anything else? Also, if you guys come across any like readings or anything that like, specifically touched you, that you think might be beneficial to like the larger art forum community as a whole, I do want to let you guys know that like you can send it to me. Like, again, I'm sort of like finding these readings as I go. So I'm definitely open to if anybody wants to share one specifically that they've found poignant or relevant to, what we're talking about. Any questions, comments? Any particular topics that anybody wants to address? No? All right. Well, go enjoy the rest of your day, or at least try to. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
And,
Bye. Thank you. Have a good day.
And
Thank you.
I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.